Hello students, welcome to today's government class. Previously in our last class, we looked at citizenship as a topic. We explored so many numerous concepts there, how to acquire it, the various forms of citizenship that we have, the benefits of being a citizen, and then we looked at the difference between a citizen and a non-citizen. However, I noticed that throughout the course of this, of the preliminary parts of this course, government, we've been looking at constitution. And that's why today we're going to look in detail as to what a constitution is, the various types of constitution we have, and what are the basic features that should be in a constitution, right? Because we mentioned that the constitution is one of the things that limits sovereignty, is another thing that helps to enforce power. So it means that the constitution is a very vital element in government. So what exactly is constitution? By definition, we said that the constitution is a body of agreed rules and principles which states how the powers of governing a country is given. So we said that the constitution states how the governing powers of a country are and how these powers can be exercised. That's exactly what a constitution does. The constitution serves as a framework or a fundamental law for the land. And it is through the constitution that a lot of powers and authority can be extracted from. So it's important that we put this definition in mind. We said a constitution can be defined as rules or principles guiding the governing powers of a state, as well, also we can say stating. That's a very important word to use there. So it can be defined as rules or principles stating the governing powers of a state. By state here, we mean country. So you can put that in brackets, country, as well as how those powers are to be exercised. Simply put, we can say that the constitution is a basic framework or fundamental law of the land. So we can say, simply put, it establishes a basic framework or fundamental law of the land. The constitution is very vital in establishing structure. This is because within the confines of a constitution, the powers of the various arms and organs of government can be extracted. The extent of their powers are usually contained there. And then we have, things that go against or outside of those powers. So the next thing we want to look at is, how is the constitution made, or what makes up the constitution? That is why we must look at the sources of constitution. If we say that constitutions are rules and principles that guide, where do we get these rules and principles? The first and most important one is the history of the people, the history of the landowners, the history of the people. A lot of people have a past, and that past is very vital in determining the extent of powers that political leaders should have. Past political developments and revolutions have a pivotal part to play when bringing down the content of a constitution. And that's why we said that the history of the people is a source of its constitution. For example, you realize that Nigeria as a previously colonized state, or as a colonized state of Britain, would also entrench within its constitutions some items that would safeguard them from the problems that they had while they were under colonial regime. This means that what the people have gone through in the past, their history, forms a pivotal part of the constitutional contents. Also, acts of parliament serve as a source of constitutional items. Acts of parliament. Remember, we said the parliament can also be seen as the lawmakers, that is the legislature, right? Recall that the legislature makes laws. Now, the acts of those parliaments, the enactment of the parliaments, also form part of the constitution. And that's why we call them the lawmakers. So the laws that are from the legislative arm of government are usually confined within the constitution. Also, the customs and traditions of the people are very important as well. Customs and traditions. That is why in some constitutions, you can see things like gender identification, what we're having trends of today, non-binary, those things can be accepted in certain constitutions. However, in the Nigerian constitution, it may not be allowed. Things like homosexuality, those things could be allowed in some constitutions, and that is because within their values, their norms, and their beliefs, those things are accepted. However, here in Nigeria, we have very strong laws and beliefs, usually spurn out of the religious beliefs that exist, both Christian, Muslim, and other religious groups. And those things form a pivotal part of constitutional, the constitutional decrees that have been stated within any constitution. Also, past constitutions, that is, the constitutions of the past or constitutions of other countries, can also form part of the sources of contents in a constitution. So we have past constitutions. For example, the 1979 Constitution of Nigeria as amended took some of its cues from the American Constitution, or it was modeled after the American Constitution. That means that we look at where we were in the past and then obviously take it off from there and just add things that need to be added, remove things that need to be removed. And that's why we see that constitutions they cannot really be changed or thrown away and then a new one is started. Rather, we have constitutions being amended, meaning that they look at what we had in the past, the old constitutions, and then use that to form the new constitution. And that's why we said a past constitution forms part of the sources of constitution. Also, conventions form part of a constitution. We said conventions are usually accepted political practices or precepts that form part of the country's constitution. For example, a lot of conventions were held that formed the foundation for human rights, that formed the foundation to stop slavery, and those things were then entrenched within the constitution. And that's why we believe that conventions are a source of constitution, contents in a constitution. Also, we have things called constitutional conferences. What are constitutional conferences? These are meetings that are held to resolve and discuss difficult constitutional issues. We do realize that sometimes some items in the constitution need to be debated. They could be interpreted variously. And thus, constitutional conferences are helped to discuss those matters and then find a way to resolve it. And the resolutions of those constitutional conferences then form part of the constitution that is usually created. So we can include constitutional conferences here. Finally, we have what we call judicial precedents. Judicial precedents are past judgments of the law courts. That's why we said judicial precedent. By precedent, we mean like past, before you. Now, judgments made by the judiciary, which is the arm of government responsible for interpreting the constitution. That's where you have the court, you have lawyers and the likes. Now, precedents of the judicial system form part of constitutional items or help in resolving constitutional matters. For example, if an individual goes to a law court to seek redress on a particular issue, it is possible that the promulgation of that court or the decision of that court will form a basis of how such issues can be handled in the future. For example, Mr. A kills Mr. B, and then Mr. B's family sues Mr. A to court, and then the court then rules that Mr. A should be sentenced to death. It is very possible that in the Constitution, it will be listed there that the punishment for killing another called homicide becomes death, right? So this judicial precedents, that is what have how has this matter been handled in the judiciary? If we see that this matter is occurring frequently, then we can just go right ahead and place that into the Constitution. Thus, when a lawyer or a judge is presented with such a case, they can refer back to that judicial precedents and then make judgments based on that. So we can put that here. That's the last source we have here, judicial precedents. So these are some of the ways that we can get contribution for the contents that are included in a constitution. Now, let's look at the features of a constitution, right? What does a constitution generally contain? Features of a constitution. The first thing that is usually in a constitution is what we call the preamble. The preamble is simply like an introduction to a book. In the preamble, we have a summary of the items that we are likely to see as we progress through the pages of the Constitution. The preamble is one of the most vital parts of a constitution because within it has a summary of what the Constitution covers and what it does not generally cover. That is, the scope and exemptions or exclusions of the Constitution are usually summarized within the preamble. Beyond that, we have the political structure of a state entrenched within the Constitution. The political structure. This is equally very, very important. Within the Constitution, it defines whether that country is practicing federalism, unitary system of government, or even uncommonly, a military system of government. Because we do know why it's uncommon is because the military usually discard constitution and work with acts and decrees. Nonetheless, it also helps us state whether the country is democratic in nature, if it's unitary, if it's federal, right? And that helps in understanding how power is divided within the various organs of government. So the Constitution has the political structure usually embedded within it. Also, it includes the powers and functions of the political institutions that exist there. So, the political institutions. In the Constitution, the powers of the arms of government like the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary are usually stated clearly within the Constitution. Their powers are there, their functions, and also their limitations. It is usually included in the Constitution. This helps to ensure that they do not act ultra vires. That is, they do not act outside of what they are meant to or outside their jurisdiction. Also, the Constitution must include the type of relationship that exists between the institutions of government, right? The type of relationship that exists between the political institutions. What do we mean by this? We are trying to understand, are powers separated or are powers fused? Are there systems of checks and balances? This is the type of relationship that the Constitution attempts to include and illustrate, such that the institutions of government understand the relationship that must exist between them. Also, it indicates the party system practice. The party system practice. Within the Constitution, you know whether a country is a one-partisan state, two-partisan state, or a multi-partisan state. That is, if only one political party is allowed and legally recognized, or if just two political parties, or if multiple political parties are allowed, just like we have here in Nigeria. So the party system of a state is also included within the Constitution. One of the most vital things that you must find in a constitution is the fundamental human rights. It is very important. The rights of an individual that must not be alienated or disenfranchised must be included there. That way, when a citizen's right is violated, they can seek redress on the basis of backing of the Constitution. Where the Constitution omits the fundamental human rights of their citizens, then those rights can actually be trampled upon. So if a state truly upholds the fundamental human rights of people, then it should include that in its constitution. Also, the political ideology of the state is included. The political ideology of the state. This looks at the fundamental objective of the state, right? Is it a dictatorship? Are they communist states? Are they socialist states? Are they capitalist states? Is it a mixed economy, right? It's very important to understand the fundamental objective of the state and to include it within the Constitution. Also very important, within a constitution, the process of amendment must be indicated. The process of amendment. This helps the legislature to understand the steps that must be taken in order to amend, update, or adjust the constitution to suit, the happenings of that particular time. Also, the constitution indicates the qualifications of a citizen as well as the process of acquiring citizenship. Recall those steps or those things, those features we believed are important for an individual to have, for them to qualify for citizenship. Those things must be included in the Constitution. This is because the Constitution is the most important reference book that a country must have. Within it must cover all the important sectors or sectors of that particular economy. Also, the tenure of government office must also be included in the Constitution. The tenure of government office. If a political leader can stay in office for 4 years, it should be included. If those 4 years can be renewed once, it should be included. If it can be renewed twice, included. If it's an indefinite amount of years, it should also be included. That way, when a governor or president begins to stay more than that required time, we understand that this is moving from a democracy to a dictatorship. So it's very important that that is put there to ensure that the electoral system, as well as the right to vote and be voted for, can be exercised and will not be trampled upon. Also, the type of electoral system is very important to be included in the Constitution. Type of electoral system. When we look at the topic electoral system, we'll be able to shed more light. But here, we're looking at how does voting take place? Is it by a simple majority? Is it an absolute majority? Is it a ballot system? However way must be included in the Constitution. For example, in Nigeria, we have a secret ballot system where individuals simply place however way they want who their candidate is in secret, right? Simple majority could just be, oh, these are the 3 candidates, stand behind the candidates, or all those in favor of this. Those are simple majority. Absolute majority, secret ballot system. These are various electoral systems that could be practiced, and the type that is allowed or permitted in a country must be included in the constitution. Finally, the structure of the public and civil service must also be included, right? The civil servants and the public servants, the structure of their functions must be included. And what the service in general does, those things must be included within the constitution. Now, let's look at the types of constitution. Yeah, there are various types of constitutions. However, they can be classified into 2. We have the written constitution and the unwritten constitution. So we'll start with the first one. Let's look at a written constitution. As the name implies, a written constitution can simply be defined as a document or set of documents that establishes the selection of rules embodied in a document which the fundamental principles of a political system as well as the powers of the various agencies are written down and codified. How do I simplify that into a simple sentence? We are simply saying that a written constitution are the set of rules embodied in a document in which the fundamental principles of the state as well as the powers of their various agencies are written down and codified. Right? So we said this. Now recall that by written constitution, we mean that it is actually written down. Physical, like there's a physical document that must be seen. So we said the written constitution is a selection or a set of selected, right, rules embodied in a document in which the functions of a political system as well as the powers of the governing bodies are written down and codified. That is a written constitution. What we're saying is the set of rules and regulations that we have are embedded in a document. And that document can be seen and read by all. Right? The Constitution establishes selection of rules, right, which contain the fundamental principles of a political system, that is their ideology, their structure, the institutions, as well as the powers of their various agencies. That's the agencies which the government uses to go. And those things are written down and codified in a single document. What this means is a written constitution can actually be seen, can be read out loud, and can be made reference to. This means that there will be very many benefits of using this constitution, some of which include, 1, proper documentation. Right now, we're looking at the merits of a written constitution. One is that there is proper documentation. And do you realize that what proper documentation does